In 1996, the world watched as aliens blew up the White House. Independence Day became the ultimate 4th of July film, loud, patriotic, and wildly satisfying. A story where independence seemed to happen in a single dramatic moment, one speech, one battle, one clear turning point. And boy, what is a turning point? But nearly 30 years on, the stories of independence are still being told in a variety of ways, from our Broadway stages to our national museums. But the real story of American independence wasn't a single moment, and it certainly wasn't just fought on battlefields. Because this year marks the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, the founding of the United States as a result of a Revolutionary War that in many ways began not with guns, but with goods. It happened in shops, in homes, in ports, and in people's everyday choices about what to buy, what to boycott, and what to refuse. Tea, textiles, imported goods, taxed goods. Everyday items became political, consumption became protest, and suddenly what you bought or didn't became a statement. In other words, this was a revolution you could hold in your hand. And 250 years later, that relationship between culture, commerce, identity, and patriotism hasn't gone away. It's just moved slightly elsewhere. Because today, one of the most visible and sometimes uncomfortable places this plays out is in the museum gift shop. Weird, I know. The place where history meets price tags, where meaning becomes merchandise, and institutions which are designed to preserve the past are also trying to fund their future. So today I'm joined by Melody Caban, a museum retail consultant from Texas, USA, who works in the intersection of culture and commerce. And she helps institutions navigate that balance between storytelling, sustainability, and sales. This is history for fuck's sake, being quietly radical and looking at where culture choices aren't just in the street or on our screens, but at the checkout. So, Melody, thank you for joining us on History for Fuck's Sake. And I just can't wait to hear your story.
Well, I'm a museum store consultant, but what the heck does that mean, right? I am a big fan of cultural commerce when it comes to museums, cultural centers, everything about that. And I look at the retail side of things. So bringing in that earned revenue, bringing in all those pieces and connecting them to the museum itself, to the interpretation, really, I like to say creating stores that surprise and delight. And we need a lot of that in our life, right? Everyone loves a museum store.
Totally. It's there is a amazing video. I'm sure you will have seen it. It's a spoof takeoff of Macklemore, and it's basically a spoof of Thrift Shop, the song, and it's called Gift Shop, and it's all about museum gift shops. It is the funniest
Yes.
thing you've ever seen. I'm definitely going to be putting a link to that in the podcast notes. So how did you get into this? Like it's I mean, it's a niche kind of working in museums and stuff anyway for all of us, but it's
Yeah.
an even bigger niche or smaller niche, I should say, when you say, I want to be on the commercial side of
Yeah.
museums. And I have to say, I have been there myself. And once, hence I think you and I have had a couple therapy sessions together talking about this online. And, um, and I wanted to know, like, tell us your background. How did you get into this?
Yeah. I have a background in art history, and I'd like to joke that I am a failed curator because that was the only option, right? When you went to school, you're either a curator or that's pretty much it with an art history degree. And I love business. I love those numbers. I love that side of things. And when I happened to end up in a museum store, I realized I love this space. It's that meeting of the right brain, left brain, a little math, a little planning, creativity, all matched together. And I leaned into that. It was a spot that I didn't know much about, and it just made me so excited to be in it and find out folks, find vendors, and see how it could really grow across cultural commerce. So that's really how I got started. And I get to be a bit of a curator every day. in this space. And I also get to look at those numbers, bring in money to support these museums too, which is a whole different way of supporting.
I feel the same way. So like I started out in museums and heritage in at the Imperial War Museum at in London, and I was in marketing, and despite the fact that I had a degree in history, I'm probably the only person in my degree group that uses that degree who isn't an academic. I hope that there are people from my degree group who did go into history as academics. I just felt like that same sort of need, urge, joy that
Mhm.
you've just described of I I I love giving back to museums and heritage and culture in this way because
Yeah.
it really taps into my ADHD brain as well, which I discovered, which is, I love novelty. I love, the moving on to different things and,
Hmm.
marketing, fundraising, business planning, commercial. That's totally wired into me now. But I also feel, I'm incredibly empathetic and I wanted to do something that I felt I was potentially could bring joy to other people with as well.
Hmm.
Um, and I bring joy to myself. Hence, I do a podcast called History for fuck's sake. And that experience, first of all, the smell of going into museums, I
Oh,
love it. That sort of, and it's not, and it's actually completely, stereotypical because most of them don't smell like dusty old places. They're just amazing modern visitor experiences. But there are some times where you're like, oh, it smells like old books and I love it. And
yeah.
but then when you move into the museum shop, kids love it, but I also think it's like a playground for adults as well because it's bringing together, as you said, this creativity and it's take the time to surround yourself in the things that you
Mm.
want to take away from your experience. So near where I live, there's a place called Cultural Espace, which is a big immersive, and I love going into their gift shop because
Mm.
they are really good at rotating their content, and so like it's Frida Kahlo and Matisse, and I'm like I totally need that Frida Kahlo tea towel that I'm only going to get here. I'm not going to get it online because
Exactly.
everybody can get that online. So I get really interested when you like kind of bespoke stuff and if the museum retail is done well, you're like,
Yeah.
I can't get this anywhere else. Awesome. So
Yeah.
that's me. I'm with you, sister, on the love of that kind of experience. Um,
Exactly. I get so excited because like you said, it's a new problem and a new opportunity wherever we go, right? And
Absolutely.
we get to solve these things that kid me would be so excited to get to do this for work.
I know it feels like you kind of tell people like that this is a job and they're like, "What?" My
Yeah.
dad said to me, "You have the coolest job in the world." And I said, "Yeah, I kind of do." And then
Yeah.
he said to me because he's been watching The Gentleman on Netflix
Mm.
and I do support a lot of historic houses and things like that. And he says, "I think I'm going to call you the Susie Glass of the heritage world." And I thought to myself, okay, we haven't gotten to the point yet where we're suggesting that they grow marijuana underneath the historic houses. There might get to be a point, all right. I think we should be ahead of the game around legalization. But yeah, it did make me laugh. So tell me what you think are some of the biggest misconceptions museum leaders have about retail and in your experience.
I think the biggest misconception really is that retail is a separate entity within the museum. It really is holistically a part of the museum, at least it should be. So when a director comes in and they might not know about retail, they might not know where to begin, you should really start from the museum itself and make sure you're bringing in the museum retail into the experience and bringing that cultural commerce back into the culture of the museum. And it doesn't have to be, a giant box store or a $1 million boutique. It can fit the size of your museum. No need to have you be the Amazon of 1 day delivery here. The whole reason we shop there is because it's not. So to keep that in mind.
I was chair of the Vagina Museum in London, and their
Love.
retail, which is mostly online, so they do have in store as well, in museum. There's so many things I've bought from there that just really speak to me in terms of, they've been so creative around their
Yeah.
merchandising and what they've been able to do and turning things into, art essentially. And there's this cycle between actually what's on display in the museum and gallery, then going into and how that's translated and
Yeah.
interpreted into the retail. But then there's almost like a flip side to that, that actually the really creative retail versions of things become almost art in their own right. It's like, I want to take this and put this
Yeah.
back in the gallery
Hmm.
because,
Hmm.
like, this is somebody else's interpretation of what's been going on in this exhibition or whatnot. And I love that way that different artistry, different commercial people, just different brains kind of think
Hmm.
through this stuff. And I was going to ask you, what would you say have been some of the most, iconic or nice to have or amazing products that you've seen developed from, bespokely for museums?
Ooh. No, I think really it's those pieces that are hyper mission oriented. Like, of course, like just like you were speaking with the Vagina Museum, it feels like this is a part of the collection. It feels like, of course, you'd have this there. It makes the experience completely itself. So, like, those they have these beautiful little hippos, I believe at the Getty, and it's just such a fun little experience to have this piece in store. It's so fun and lighthearted, to bring those in, or having some wonderful at the Japanese museum in LA. Those wonderful shirts that are touching on history, not just from yesterday, but really bringing it today to what the history is like in the US today and bringing that forward, sticking to their mission again. It's like you're wearing a piece of artwork, wearing the collection on yourself, and you just feel stronger for having been able to do that. So commercial doesn't have to be a bad word. It can really be part of the interpretation, part of every piece of the museum. You just happen to be purchasing it in store and being able to take it home and share it with folks.
It's that extension of that joy that or that emotional connection that you hopefully
Yeah.
had at the museum and being able to take that home as that reminder. I'm a big one for fridge magnets, tea towels and
Hmm.
fridge
Hmm.
magnets. There's utility that I think I'm going to buy my tea towels that I need to, not at the grocery store because that's
Hmm.
boring. I'm going to have really cool tea towels of places I've been and, experiences that I've had. And I think that helps you tell your own personal story as well at
Hmm.
home. Um, I mean, it's a weird dichotomy, isn't it? Between, we say commercial is a dirty word and
Hmm.
within the museum sector. But then if you talk to other people who are not working in the museum sector or in academia or things like that, you say museum and they're like, ooh, you know? And I feel like our role in this sort of the marketing, the business planning, the fundraising, the commercial, the front of house,
Hmm.
we are those people that exist in those liminal spaces
Hmm.
between the market and the audiences out there and what they
Hmm.
want, need, etc. And it's in how we portray what they're going to get beforehand, what they have in terms of their very first, encounter with the museum, down to their last encounter on site, which is typically send them out through the gift shop, send them out through the gift
Hmm.
shop. And I'd love to know more about that. It's sort of like why, what, like, is it just a shopper's psychological thing, or is it like trap them and they might buy a stuffed toy? Um, and then of course it's the post follow up. It's the marketing teams reaching out and sort of trying to
Yeah.
get people to be those repeats. And we are these ambassadors on the edges. And what have you found in terms of people and that you've worked with? And do you ever get sad or upset or really really happy about some of the stories that you've heard from these people?
Especially. in that space that I'm in commercial, I tend to speak to everybody in a way that a lot of folks don't. I speak to, sure, curatorial, library. I speak to front of house, visitor services, heck, facilities, a little bit of everything, because you're planning out your pop-up store maybe, or you're planning how the movement happens within the space, or seeing with marketing what we can do and what the kind of audience is. But a lot of these places, especially front of house, get lost in between. The they are so important to getting everything done. With if they disappeared, a museum could not be open without them, right? And I don't think we give them that respect to be able to hear their voices. They know our visitors better than most people back a house. They see them, they see it in action. They know why people didn't like that exhibit, and they know why they loved it. So hearing that, it can frustrate me to see that people will not have that growth opportunity. So maybe they are in visitor services and they don't give them that opportunity to go into other spaces of the museum because it's just front of house, right? But there's so much important information that they have that you're letting go once you don't give them that option to continue within your space.
Absolutely. And I think it's a really nice segue into sort of the other sort of parts of our conversation, which is,
Mm,
going back to the 250th anniversary. And one of the things you and I were talking about and thought, oh, this is a really cool angle is, okay, so the establishment of the United States in
mhm.
1776 followed on from, the Revolutionary War. And you could argue that the Revolutionary War, starting with the Boston Tea Party, was about shopping, couldn't you? All right.
Yeah,
That they didn't want to pay the tax on the goods and, decided that, I mean, I'm so simplifying it so massively, but I love the idea that actually that fundamentally the schism that happened between Britain and the United States had to do with shopping. And what's really
mhm.
funny is when you talk to a lot of British people who go to the States on holiday, what do they say? The shopping. It's we're gonna go to the outlets, everything's so much cheaper. And I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not so sure that's the case anymore, but that certainly was the case when I was growing up. Like my dad would take us to the States for Canadian Thanksgiving, and like that was
Oh yeah.
his excuse for he's buying 9 new pairs of shoes. So, I don't know what was going on there, but like it was shoe shopping weekend in the States.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I kind of thought, what do you think to that as an angle of is the 250 is the founding of
Mm.
the Republic of the United States um actually something to do with being consumers? And does that
Yeah.
reflect in the culture at all?
First off, I love that tourism is part of the shopping is part of our tourism period here. You come, you shop, you're planning ahead what to do. But I think it does fit with it because, how we spend our money really shows our values. And how we spent our money or not spent didn't spend our money on British goods showed our values then. And it was standing for that. And buying British goods really meant that you were British, right? That was buying into who you were. So if you were buying American goods, what does that mean now? So I think it's spot on.
And I tell you what, and forgive me, but I would argue, and I'd say, and I say this as a Canadian, but I would also argue that most Brits would say this as well, is that since 1776, you cannot get a decent cup of tea in the United States of America. All right. It just doesn't exist. All right. Coffee, absolutely. All right. Good
Oh
cup of
yeah.
English cup of cha kind of thing. Nah. And that's what I'm drinking at the moment, by the way. So yeah, so I think
And
it's
coffee here.
yeah, exactly. And I've seen so many really funny things, when you ask, people and Canadians are like that as well. It's like, well, would you like a cup of tea? Oh no, that's like dirt water. No, thank you. All right. It's like, all right, fair enough. It's an acquired taste.
Hmm.
So what is going on right now? And I don't try to be overly political in our podcast, but
Hmm.
is what in the context of museums that you're seeing and the centenary and all of that is is it something different, or is it the same, or is it kind of trying to keep things just sort of let's not talk about stuff? What is happening at the moment?
Well, in the US, things are changing. You can't really hide that. Uh, when it comes to everything from grants to funding, those sorts of pieces, they're in flux, right? But with the 250th, you're seeing folks taking it on in different ways, especially depending on where you are. I'd say East Coast, people are deep in the 250th celebration, honoring, and uh, really going deep into the history of it. They're very connected to it. But how they do so is going to be a little different everywhere you go. Uh, and being able to take the time to celebrate that. You're seeing a lot of folks planning them themselves locally and seeing how it fits into their interpretation instead of the overall. Say the US says this is the 250th, we're all going to do that.
Hmm.
You're seeing a lot of more bespoke planning on the smaller scale of what actually 250th means to these places themselves.
I mean, that's really interesting because I suppose that's and I will quote a quite a famous saying that when they compare Canada to the U.S. is they sort of say the U.S. is a melting pot of cultures and
Hmm.
Canada is a mosaic, and and I think that that's come from sort of that post Second War hegemony and of
Hmm.
everybody is American and it is American first versus, and certainly in Canada it was always it was always there was a much more overt kind of recognition of where people came from. There was terrible recognition about our First Peoples and our Indigenous peoples in Canada, which is just horrendous. But in terms of that kind of homogenous sort of we're Canadian versus we're American, it never had the same kind of impact. And so it's really
Hmm.
interesting to hear how now this year, this centenary, it's you're saying that people are exploring it in their own kind of versions of that rather than in a told this is what we're celebrating. It's actually it's people are interpreting it differently.
Yeah, you're
Is would that
seeing
be about right?
yeah, a little that interpretation and a bit of that nuance, right?
Mm,
That it's it's not just flag pins and
mm,
flag backgrounds and all of that, all kind of Fourth of July feel to it.
mm.
Really adding that nuance to what it means with their own mission, what it means with their local communities, and how they can bring in a variety of backgrounds and their community really into it.
And what independence actually means as
Yeah.
well, because that's the 4th of July. It's Independence Day. We'll talk about the movie in a little bit, and which I rewatched, which was hilarious. Um, and it I was I was curious to know what you thought about this idea of how culture is tied up in what we spend our money on. And, oh, given what's going on globally at the moment, that impact of geopolitics on what we spend our money on, what I think we're going to see, the world over is
Yeah.
places like museums, retail, not taking in as much because inflation's going to go up and people may, and I don't know actually, I'm going to let you speak for you. You're the expert. People may or may not think that actually buying something in a museum shop is a good use of their limited pound or dollar. Um, but what I really hope is that actually we can find a way of making whatever kind of retail lines are going to be going on these days. There's and we talked about tea towels, a utility to to things that might make people going, actually, that is something I do need at home. I'm going to buy it here at the museum rather than off Amazon or something like that.
Hmm.
Are you having those kinds of conversations, with museums at the moment? Is that coming up?
Oh, absolutely. Because you're seeing those changes in prices, not just for the general public, right? You're seeing that within museums for their supplies, for everything they're purchasing within there, and for their products in store. So you're seeing also that, some prices are being raised in store because prices are being raised overall. But when it comes to store products, thing is, I think when you do an item right in a museum, you're creating something that isn't just a souvenir in that it's a tchotchke. It's not something you get once, you throw it away. It's really an item that you can keep, have that memory in long term. A little bit of like you're saying with the tea towels, a bit of that affordable, almost luxury piece that you're getting an everyday item that's just been turned up a notch in the way that only museums can do with their collection. And so now you have this special piece that's part of your home. And I'm seeing a lot of more people buying with their values. So
Mm.
millennials, Gen Z coming in, really everybody going, if I have this dollar, I want it to matter more to me. I want it to go further and be more impactful for me. And, that might be getting more for your money in one space, but really getting that more impact in a museum store of a beautiful card that you can only find there. A, that tote bag that really remembers you that family trip that that can't be found anywhere else. It's bespoke and you can enjoy every day and have that moment with. So, so I think people are really taking a look at how their retail can be different. Not just a piece that, again, lives once and you're just checking off an item. We've all seen the spoons, the posters that are badly printed, the jewelry that you're not quite sure what it has to do. It's not made by anybody local or has to do with collection. But like taking it back in, making it again more nuanced. And it makes a big difference in how people see it and buy it, gives you a reason to really invest.
So here's an interesting one for you, and I think I'm gonna. This is probably gonna throw you a bit sideways, so I apologize. And if you, if
Love
we
it.
want to, I'll say it. That if we want to take some time, we could go on to another question and come back. But
Yeah.
thinking about what are the things that are the most popular in museum shops.
Hmm.
If the founding fathers were to come from 1776, what do you think that they would think are the most? What would be the most popular items for them?
Ooh, ooh. I feel, honestly, I feel like all the silliest items would be their favorite. Like all the fun little technology items, the throwback Tamagotchis of the sort of things, the playful items, because they did have a sense of humor also. So maybe they can pick up those papers, they can pick up that quill, but having that information, having something a little different that you couldn't find these items probably back then. You're maybe making them or uh, it was more of an inside joke, but I think having some fun, silly items might have been their favorite. That's what
I
I'm going to vote
I,
for.
I kind of agree with you with that. I could just imagine, Thomas Jefferson picking up
Yes,
one of the pens with like a giant dinosaur on the end that, that popular with
exactly.
Gen Z girls and Thomas
Yeah.
Jefferson at the same time.
Yes. And
I think that,
wars.
yeah, exactly. So I think it's funny to imagine these kinds of things, and
Oh,
I think people might find it silly, but we need that. We need
yeah.
our imagination. We need our creativity. I think this is one of the things that great museums do is that they give you a space to just be away from the constant reality of lives, but also the constant screen
Hmm.
base on our phones. And
Hmm.
those that are doing it incredibly well have found amazing ways to, build immersive technology so it's experiential into it, but also not losing that that realness that
Hmm.
people really need. And that for me, that's why people think about museums when they say, what do I like about it? It's like, I like the stillness. I like the quietness. And then I start laughing and go, you weren't there when the school groups were there then. Okay. Because there is nothing quiet about that. There is nothing quiet about the Louvre. All right. There is nothing quiet about like, the Air and Space Museum on the Mall in Washington. That is just heaving all the time.
Mhm.
And I got to touch a bit of the moon when I was there, which was quite
Ooh.
fun. All right. So I did enjoy that. But, you know, I think we sort of touched upon this earlier about sort of museums using retail as this extension of
Mhm.
interpretation. And I was going to ask you, why is the shop always at the end? Or is it? Have you seen like amazing opportunities or examples of where it's been done really differently and it's
Mhm.
worked really well? And tell me about that.
Yeah, first of all, at the end, it's just iconic, of course, le- leaving through the gift shop. You do see some in the middle. I find that a lot of times it might be we planned out the museum and this was the leftover room we had.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so you end up in that corner somewhere. But some great museums also do those pop-up shops, those little exhibit shops along the way. I've seen science museums or like the Met, I think they have over 10 little pop-up shops throughout the Met at any time and are able to kind of capture a sweet little moment of an exhibit or of a space within that shop. But having it at the end is one of those chances to be able to put that cherry on top of the experience. And I love this fact that this study showed that just coming to the museum store itself, ending with that, even if you don't shop, even if you don't purchase anything, it makes people more likely to come back to the museum within a year. So having that positive experience, you're asking questions, you're touching everything, right? I'm touching everything in the shop.
It's that tactileness.
Yeah.
And I suppose in maybe in sort of quite traditional museums, there's people and children are discouraged to touch things. So it's like almost in some cases, um, it's their first opportunity to be
Hmm.
tactile, if they're not in, a learning session or something like that. And so it actually plays a role in sort of, as you said, bringing people back, giving joy to kids and sort of being able to take things home with them, right?
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. You get to actually be hands-on. I always say that folks might not know how to museum, but pretty much everyone knows how to shop. And
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
go in, you're confident about the space, and you get to enjoy that museum in a whole different way, but one that you know. And you can
Yeah.
really be able to enjoy it, leave with that positive experience, and come back.
Absolutely. Have you got any particular museum shops that you just love and you've thought they have done their collection or their exhibition so proud? They've come up with a message that's so poignant or impactful for their audience.
Mm.
Is there any particular that stand out for you?
I feel like they change all the time, but I'll say I love the Seattle Art Museum. Always beautiful working with local artists, indigenous artists, touching with creativity and those bespoke items. And I love the Norton Simon Museum over in Pasadena, California. A little bit because that was my growing up museum,
Mhm.
the one I went to, but it really has that same feeling of you're saying almost that it's quiet and you get to just be whisked away within the exhibits, within each little product, go deeper into it. Those little bronze items, the books itself, and have that wonderful window that keeps you in the museum, even though you're in a retail space.
Mhm. I mean, have you ever seen where you might get like design ranges that
Mm.
have been done really well without reducing the sort of the history to kitsch, where it's just it's just really spot on and you're like that is yeah, hands down one of the best things you've seen turned into a product that people can take away with them.
Mhm. I really love. the New York Historical for that. They really touch into the historical while creating pieces that are you want to take home. You want to take home. Of course, they're beautiful. They touch on that history that they have, but you also want to wear that. You want to wear the scarf. You want to bring those notebooks home and start putting your own histories into. So I think they do a really wonderful job of creating uh, those pieces that do both of those. And you're just excited. If you're a history nerd, you want to bring that in. It feels like you're t literally taking a piece of the museum home.
Brilliant. Let's move over to a little bit of a conversation about, US versus UK. I mean,
Ooh.
that is essentially what the 250th anniversary was all about.
Mhm.
And, some of the things that's been very different between our sort of museum sector in Britain versus the US sector is around philanthropy versus funding.
Yeah.
What is what is the situation in the US regards to how most of the museums survive financially?
I think a lot of museums ask themselves that
Yeah, I
pretty
think it's
often.
like I think we're all in this like long-term career long existential crisis. Yeah,
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Well, in the US, the average kind of breakdown for supporting a museum is about a third donations, about a third earned revenue, which is tickets, the retail, catering, all those different things. And then about a third government, local, and some interest brought wrapped in there. So you're getting those from a little bit of different spots. And the smaller you are, the more important that government funding becomes.
Mm.
So any changes there, it can feel a bit precarious.
Has there been any impact on museums since like the changes to the endowment for the arts and things going on over the last couple of years?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There have been changes, and there's a lot of folks trying to figure out how to bring in more revenue in different spots, see what they can do with more different grants. It's a lot of shuffling in the background that if you're not in museums, you don't see it. It's still a quiet place, right? You
Mm,
get to be quiet and enjoy it, but it's madness sometimes in the background with when one thing changes, one thing gets delayed, to try to make sure that that funding continues to be able to keep those doors open.
mm. And what, I mean, it's not that different here in the UK.
Mhm.
We don't actually have a massive amount of government funding. We have a government sort of arm's length body called the Arts Council. We have something quite unusual in Britain, which I would love to see replicated in Canada and the US and in Europe. It's called the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And that's what's one of them. But it's a lottery syndicate, the National Lottery Syndicate, and a percentage of the earnings, which is run commercially, gets given to good causes.
Mm,
And so that goes to arts, it goes to sport, it goes to heritage, it goes to community practice, and the National Lottery Heritage Fund, which I do a lot of work with, they do some fantastic sort of support, particularly around project or program based, sort of outcomes driven
mhm.
work. And I've worked on I think over 200 of these projects so
Oh,
far. And
wow.
so, and because my background, as I said, is in sort of business planning, fundraising, audience engagement, marketing, all of that, it's amazing to be able to support these organizations to make the most of the funding that is on offer. And but yeah, they all face the same issues. It's like how in a world where some people are struggling to feed their families. Some people are,
Mhm.
worried that AI is going to take their jobs. Some people are worried that their kids are stuck on their tablets the whole time. How do you how do you continue to make museums, heritage, culture relevant?
Yeah.
And I think it's storytelling for sure, but I think it's about understanding the people and the audiences and actually going. you know what? What we're talking about here is not that important to them. But is there a a lens in which we can help tell the story or help people interpret the context of their own lives
Hmm.
through this? An example for me is I've worked on a number of projects where in order to sort of highlight the heritage and the experience, it wasn't about doing a new exhibition. It was about actually, we're going to pay for a series of younger people who were out of employment to go through some of the like health and safety and basic training for the maritime industries because it was
Mm,
this project that we were working on was all about maritime heritage, seafaring heritage, and then to be able to do some of those skills training sessions in heritage venues like the museum, etc.
mm,
So it brought people in not to, hey, come and look at the exhibition. It brought people in to, hey, come and have a look at, you know, get something from this that's actually going to help you get a job. It's going to help build, your pride in the sort of civic environment within the city, etc. And I think that's what I think museums, when they really get it right, they
hmm,
realize that their role isn't in the proselytizing about their collection. It's about how the stories in their collection or the passion of the people who work in museums can actually touch the lives of those people who don't necessarily realize that this is
hmm,
something for them. And I think that for me is the fundamental reasons that museums exist, that we are it's a space for learning and experiencing that's safe,
hmm,
and and that I think is the really exceptional part of what we do, that there's no real commercial agenda behind it. It's there to, I mean, there are obviously sometimes things, certain funders, certain, philanthropic sort of partnerships, etc., that, can cause a little bit of furore, but by and large, they exist for good, for the
yeah.
good of all people. Um, and that's a big reason why I've stayed in doing what I've been doing, because it's, at the end of my life, it would be quite nice to go, hey, I did some good things. I helped some people out, and as you said, did it in a way that wasn't just a pure curatorial way as well.
Hmm. No, I love that because really it's that piece when I see museums take that community partnership and actually reach in and understand that. So that's exactly what you're saying. And being a community partner in a way that they can see, what do you need from us? How can we support you? Not uh, how can I get you into these doors to like you said, proselytize, have an actual conversation back and forth. And that's what I love. And that's what I love also about the retail side, because I think that same idea is in those older stores or those stores that haven't quite changed with the times. And having these stores now that have products that really connect folks. Say a Mexican American exhibit that doesn't have anything made by Mexicans or Mexican Americans. It just doesn't make any sense. And bringing that in, or indigenous histories without indigenous voices, and not just having that in the exhibit, but in the store itself, and
Mm.
being able to honor that. And that really is completing that loop of community partnership and understanding. And, when you go into retail, sometimes it can be that these products are others. These are pieces that are not for you. You're walking into a store where you don't recognize yourself, just like you might not see yourself on the walls in that history. But when you do, when you see those pieces, those artists, those vendors, even those just bespoke products that are reproducing items that are in the museum because what you reproduce really tells you what people care about in that museum, right? It really makes a difference.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna bring us back to Independence Day, the movie on this one.
Yes.
Did you get a chance to watch it recently? And or when's the last time you saw it? I saw it probably about 2 weeks ago in preparation for this episode.
I think I saw it about a year or so ago. We
Okay.
were going through that, definitely looking at all those classics and taking it in.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for me, I would so love to see, as part of, really smart kind of tongue-in-cheek approach to certain sort of 250th anniversary, retail. I'd love, rather than the typical red, white, and blue, I'd love to
Hmm.
see like a celebration of actually it's aliens invading, and it's when we felt like there were heroes and heroines, and we understood and had a bit more of a we were able to have a bit more of a sense of a humor about things, because
Hmm.
life isn't that funny at the moment, is it?
No.
It's quite difficult. um so what tell me what you like about Independence Day, the film.
I mean, what I love about it, first of all, just the bombacity. They went so big. I
Roland
remember when
Emmerich is just so known for it. Yeah.
Yes, I remember when it first came out. It was epic, large, over the top, and it's exactly how I feel like as Americans, you think you take it on, right? We'd bring everybody in. It's us versus them, no questions asked here, and fighting the alien, and of course, we would take it on.
I have to say, and this is going to sound weird, but I was watching it and went, I don't think Jeff Goldblum has ever looked hotter than in this film. All right. I know they were like trying to make him all sort of academic, good looking in Jurassic Park, but it was this film actually. It was like, he looked
They got
good. He
it.
looked good. Yeah, he
They
really
got it
got that.
right.
Yeah. It made me laugh, really made me laugh. And yeah, it's one of those things. I have a love of sort of late 90s film and music, etc. And I just thought, what a nicer way to just go, right, I'm going to switch my brain off from
Yeah.
all of this like crazy reality, and let's watch Will Smith. Now, there's a lot of things we could talk about with that, which we're not going to, but let's watch Will Smith punch an alien,
Yeah.
okay, and laugh about it.
Simpler.
Yeah, much simpler way of going forward. Um, so I think that we're probably coming close to the end of this episode, but I wanted to know from you, what would you tell people, whether they're, being a variety of people, um, what would you tell people if you were advising them on different sort of products, how they might celebrate the centenary, how, sorry, I shouldn't say centenary,
Mm.
it's generic, it's the anniversary, the 250th anniversary. Centenary is 100 years. And I'll get complaints from people if I keep saying it. Um, what would you say to them in terms of, in 2026, how do you interpret what can be quite a quote unquote patriotic event, when there are plenty of people who are still patriots but don't necessarily see it in the
Hmm.
same way as perhaps patriotism has been expressed, not just in the United States, but in a lot of Western countries. What would you say to them? And then what would you say to a potential museum visitor over this course of this year and how they might get involved?
Yeah, I really think for me, looking at the 250th, it's really about telling the whole story. And the whole story might be different for whatever institution you're at, but it's way more than red, white, and blue. It's way more than than just the imagery that you expect. And people do want more. People can find that, at any shop, at any other place. But being a museum, being an institution, you have a chance to really make it something special, make it impactful, make it more about than 1 year. This could be the beginning of a lot for folks that maybe haven't gone to the spaces before. So keep that in mind and bring in the whole museum. Bring in the whole museum into this so that you can really get those insights from everyone, from that front of line, back house, everyone, because they want to be a part of this and you're missing out if you're not including them in it. And
I,
yeah.
I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. It's I always, when I'm doing my sort of consultations with staff, volunteers, etc., it's like I'll stop in the shop and I'll just have a chat with whoever's on the desk kind of thing, and sort of say, "Oh,
Mhm.
how's it going?" And what do you find here? And give them a voice, because that
Yeah.
at the end of the day is also what museums stand for, is giving our history, giving our whole people a voice
Yeah.
in telling that whole story. So, well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been really fun. I hope we covered everything that you wanted to get covered, um, and
And
um,
more.
and more. And I just think it's not an easy time at the moment. I was also going to say that red, white, and blue flags are not just for the USA, but
Mm-mm.
the the Union Jack, the British flag is red, white, and blue. The French flag is also red, white, and blue.
Hmm.
So, it's not just the good old US of A that has those the rights to those colors. So, Melody, thank you so much for joining us on History for Fuck's Sake. This has been such a wonderful conversation, a bit esoteric in terms of like the 250th anniversary, also then against the 30th anniversary of Independence Day, fantastic late 90s film, and then looking at how this all fits into this context of, actually, what's the Revolutionary War really about shopping, and discuss. And I would love to hear from people about what they thought about that. And I just think it's been amazing to hear all about your experience and how shops can, museum shops, but I think also shops in general, retail in general, can
Hmm.
interpret and connect with audiences in a way that we don't really do anymore, and it becomes just get it delivered to the door and that's it. And I think we have an opportunity to really connect with our culture a bit more through those
Hmm.
different mechanisms. And I really enjoyed talking about the difference between the US, the UK, and different types of audiences behaviors. And I thought it was a really, really lovely conversation, so thank you for that. And it's been lovely having you on the pod.
Thank you. It was great.
And before we go, thank you to our sponsor, the Tricola Collective. Tricola is a heritage development consultancy helping cultural projects unlock funding, build sustainable futures, and turn bold ideas into lasting impact. If you need expert support for a heritage or cultural project, they're the people to speak to. Find out more in the show notes.